final episode, or the final episode of this section of the Black Eyes podcast. I might actually continue this on after uh, using it as like a project. Um, so yes, in this little mini series, we had our first episode, which was background and um, kind of the darkest, lowest point, where we talked about um, you know Black history, American Black history and stuff, and going talking about the transatlantic slave trade, talking about how that led to um, the civil rights movement, kind of, and then not so much American slavery in and of itself, but more just uh, going straight from Africans to more modern history. Uh, and then in our second episode, we talked about uh, kind of how that led into how uh, media and Black people are perceived now, um, or more recently after um, supposedly the two endings to racism happened, where we had racism end in the 1800s with the abolishment of slavery and the ending of the transatlantic slave trade, and then the second ending of slavery in the 1960s. Um, and then how that led into prominent figures and how the media portrays Black people and how media portrays history in ways that can, in ways that present a narrative that uh, helps maintain the status quo. Um, and then our third episode, we got into um, how apathy in the Black community has led to um, more of a rise in Afro-surrealism as the concept and as a tool for media sake, and how um, that same inherent creativity um, and wanting has led into Afrofuturism as a prominent concept. Um, I think I know why I wanted to do the topic in general. It was I think as somebody from my background being uh, being mixed, being half Black and half white, I think I've had a pretty interesting perspective on um, how these things affect me and how they affect others. And I think it it's always been incredibly important to me to talk about these issues, because even at points in my life where I haven't been particularly like where I haven't necessarily been like, you know, marching in the street, I guess, edgy middle schooler type stuff, just kind of letting certain letting people who shouldn't be saying certain things say those things because, oh, it's just a joke, it's just kidding, without really analyzing the white supremacist structures that kind of led to me feeling like that was okay, especially since I didn't grow up around a lot of Black people. I mostly grew up around Hispanic people. And I was like, oh, it's more brown people like me. But then they stopped hanging out with me because I wasn't like them. And so even in a predominantly white environment where I was um, not treated differently by like my family, who were the white people I spent the most time around, I was still treated differently. And um, how do I want to say this? Like um, it, disincluded. Like I can't remember the word right now. But being left out because and treated differently because of my race, despite being not from white people. Uh, they're the ones who ended up in middle school feeling like they could say some certain things around me, and then me feeling like I had the authority to give them permission for those sort of things. Um, though that was the white kids, and sometimes some of the Hispanic people, but mostly the white kids. But either way, I've always grown up um, being not accepted because the area I have been growing up in and have grown to be a part of does not have a large population of uh, black people. So it never has, I don't think. So it's always just been something I've noticed and dealt with, and just always feeling like I don't have any clear community. Um, you know, uh, sometimes there's always when you are the minority of people, you always find a kind of a group to associate with to make yourself feel less alone. And I feel like some black people kind of, uh, if they were a little bit more Hispanic, like if they had Hispanic family members, and they were also half or something, or just had family friends or something, they would associate with that, and that's fine. And then some people would associate with white people because those are the people that were including them. And that's also fine. I never felt particularly good about being in either environment because those are two main environments, and I never felt like either of them accepted me well enough. Um, so I never really questioned anything about how I felt about those things, just because I didn't have any real models to how I should be feeling about some of those things. Um, I think I always knew I liked being black and like the thought of it, but I didn't really have anyone to show me why I felt that way about myself. It's definitely not a bad way to feel about myself, but nobody ever really showed me why that was a good thing and why um, it's an important thing for me to enjoy that aspect of myself. Um, so I think so. Then as I got older, after towards the end of middle school and kind of after, um, I kind of realized that it was an important part of me and that I didn't feel like some of the things I was letting slide were okay. Um, I started watching more kind of videos about how, you know, it wasn't even watching anything. It was just kind of people on the internet would be like mad at somebody for being racist. And it's like, wait, why are they mad? And then, but it's mostly the white people who are mad, but they were saying that it upholds white supremacist values. And I was like, huh, it kind of does, right? But I wasn't hearing that from black people. I ended up turning into like an SJW white leftist, like overcorrecting on the internet. But like as a black person, and I think it's a really weird camp to be in because it's like I'm overcorrecting for myself in a way, which isn't bad, but it's also not like um, what other people in the community would do. They wouldn't overcorrect in the same way, um, which I obviously didn't know. Um, but I think it helped make me feel like there were things that were wrong, which I know now, especially that there definitely were. But I think overcorrecting kind of brought me out of the space I was in where I didn't feel like anything was wrong because racism ended in 1964. Um, so I think that it definitely did. I do feel like it helped. Um, there's just like always a sense of like overcorrecting that I now notice and notice the microaggression in that now. It's like the best of both worlds, always being like, oh, why are the liberals so mad, and also being like, we should be mad at the liberals, you know. Um, and then especially as of more recently, in the last couple of years, I got more into theory, I guess, like racial theory in terms of like how we interact with each other and how we treat each other, uh, along with like you know gender and sexuality like theory as well, and how like as like a field of not like a field of study, but more as like something to like there's something to learn there, which I feel like a lot of people kind of forget that there are things to learn about topics like that because they do not like new things. People didn't decide that racism was a problem in like the last 10 years. It's always been a problem. And people didn't decide that being homophobic and transphobic was a problem in the last 2 years. They've always known it's been a problem. And there's always been people who have, studied these things and had academic discussions about these things. So it's not like, oh, why are we learning new pronouns? Why are we learning about these new things? It's like, well, you're not. You're just learning about it for the first time. It's like showing somebody math. It's like, why are we coming up with all these crazy ideas? It's like, well, we're not coming up with them right now. You just didn't know what it was. Um, and I feel like that was kind of the conceit for the podcast. It was like, okay, there's things here that I know now, like that I didn't know before because I didn't learn them in school, but I know now because I took the time on my own. And I think that was the conceit because then when you're in class with people who don't see why certain things are an issue, it it's like, well, we live in the same world and you have the exact same opportunities for growth and learning that I do. Why do you not know all of the things that I know? Which you could throw back at people easily because that's what like people say about poor and black people all the time. It's like, well, we all have the same, opportunities in this country. Why aren't you doing the same things that I'm able to do? It's like, well, some people don't have access to the same things you have access to, or don't know that there's things that they don't have access to, right? So I think that's like where that came from. Um, so when it came to um, coming up with an idea for this project, I could have done like a story. I could have written something, but I don't have a ton of confidence in my ability to sit down and write anything. So I kind of knew that the easiest for me, not even easiest in terms of like simplicity, but easiest in terms of what I can realistically accomplish with how I know my brain works. Um, I knew that the easiest and most clean course of action would be a podcast. Um, but I liked podcasts. I like podcasts already. I listen to a lot of what I've learned. I listen to YouTube videos. I don't really watch YouTube. I watch YouTube, but I'm usually doing other things at the same time, so it's in my brain. So it is almost everything I consume is like a podcast to me. I'll watch full TV shows and not get physical or like visual jokes sometimes because sometimes I am watching it for the first time while cleaning the kitchen and I'm not watching it. Um, so an audio medium was, I think, my course of action from the beginning. And I think um, me listening to podcasts and me listening to videos where it is mostly just a person talking um, really helped shape how I feel about certain things now. And I think I wanted to kind of contribute to that source of medium. There is a playlist in uh, that I have on YouTube where these are posted, and um, on my assignment that I am turning in, that kind of there are things I looked up specifically that I about the specific topics that I needed to learn more about. There were some specific videos I looked for, um, but then there are some videos on there that I just happened to watch on my own in my own time that helped shape what I talk about now. Uh, so that's what that is. So I recommend uh, anybody go and listen, like go watch those videos and stuff. Um, I think they're incredibly informative. They helped shape how I talked about these things and kind of my opinions in general. Uh, so yeah, so I think there's always more, right? When you find one thing that uh, when you find one medium or one person that gives you information, there's always more information because they got something from somewhere. So there's always more you can look into. And I feel like that's something that more people should do. So I feel like after people listen to this, if people listen to this, I think people should do more research and go watch the playlist that I have, which should be public, um, and go try to learn more about the topics that I talked about because I know I didn't even touch on everything that I thought I might or everything I know because there is so much to know that there's no chance I could have possibly um, fit all of my knowledge that I've come to learn in there. And I don't even have all of the knowledge. I don't even have close to all of the knowledge. And I didn't even get all of what I know in there, um, and all of what I feel in there. So I do recommend anybody listening go watch those things and listen and find things on your own. It's incredibly important. I think that's one of the most important things about why I wanted to do this is that for me, this was me taking that extra step to learn more about stuff that I wanted to know about and things I know that other people don't know about because they haven't taken that extra time. Um, so yeah, um, kind of one of the things a couple of the things I didn't get to, I guess, is what I can go into next. Part of what I didn't get into was how I thought that my guests or co-hosts, I guess, would um, have more questions, but I think the way that I talk and I think the way that I explain things the first time is so overly detailed that it doesn't leave room for anybody to ask questions because of how clear I force myself to be. When I talked about things, I would say it one way, and if there was any, and just to like make sure that I explain it properly and make sure that there's no confusion, I would say it a different way a second time, um, even interrupting myself to do so. But that was just so I can make sure that um, that was just to make sure that I was being understood, which ultimately does lead to a lack of needing to question what I'm saying because I did it right the first time. Like I said it correctly the first time, so there's no reason for them to need to double check anything, which I think I just showed just now in the way that I explained that. If you go into too much detail and you over explain yourself, then you can make it easier for other people to understand you. And I think that is just an important thing for me. Um, that's just an important thing for me, honestly, just to make sure, because I want to make sure that I am always understood to the best of the ability of the people around me. Um, I don't like being misunderstood because it's not that conflict is hard for me. It's that conflict is hard for other people, and sometimes people have a hard time knowing that they can have a conversation without over and over and over again, without it being tedious and still have something to learn. Because I feel like people sometimes, like, first of all, get annoyed that you have a conversation more than one time, um, and they feel like trapped in the fact that they're still having to talk about something, and then so it's already annoying to talk about something they already talked about. They don't want to hear your points again. Um, and then people don't want to be wrong. So they don't want to be wrong and they don't want to be annoyed. So they don't listen. They don't take the time to listen. Um, Especially about topics they felt like they knew about, or topics they felt don't matter to them. If something doesn't matter to you, you're not going to feel and nothing is going to compel you to listen to a different perspective, because you already have your perspective and you already feel like you're right. So why listen to anybody else? Um, which, okay, but then you have less opportunity to learn. And I feel like those people who do get annoyed by repetition and people who don't like to learn about things that don't affect them or might make them feel bad are people who are in charge of how schools build their curriculums, which leads to us having to kind of gloss over a lot of history. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff in like California schools have days off and learn about um, people who led immigrant civil rights movements in California, and I don't even know their names. I don't even know the guy's name. I know there's a guy, but I don't know his name because it's not something that I was deigned to learn because it wasn't something that my hometown, my district deemed important to um, put on a curriculum. And there's a lot of things that they don't think are important to put on a curriculum. Uh, you know, there's debates about critical race theory, which is just the theory that maybe racism is inherently tied to white supremacy, and maybe our history um, inherently reflects uh, our white supremacist values we have as a country, and that triggers people, and that makes people upset because it makes them realize, wait, maybe white people have been the problem this whole time, even though they didn't directly do anything wrong. They feel uncomfortable knowing that uh, somebody could be blaming them for something. And people don't want to be wrong. And I think that's again what it is. People don't want to be wrong so badly that they are willing to pretend that things don't exist. Because if it doesn't exist, then it does. Then you're not wrong. Um, yeah. So anyway, I think I was going somewhere with that. What I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to, which is honestly probably my fault to an extent. Um, I had a whole episode planned where we were going to talk about, um, go even farther back and go into African history, and it was going to be in a lot more broad terms. Um, just the whole podcast, everything about it was going to be a little bit more broad, um, just because I felt like it would be interesting. Um, but then I scrapped it. I had a website called 100 Facts About Africa, and um, about sea voyages, about ancient boats they found from before even the Vikings, tools that didn't help to do multiplication, whittled on bones, um, some crazy stuff that would tie into the Afrofuturism thing, which part of that is, obviously, like we said, you know, one of them is just it's the future, there are black people around, and then part of it is what if you, and the way that Black Panther kind of handles it is, what if you left Africans alone? What if you just left them alone and let them do their thing? Because ultimately that's not what happened. You kind of, people disrupted them and kept them from prospering for a very, very long time. Maybe they wouldn't have on their own, but maybe if we left capitalism and imperialism um, our foreign policy, then maybe we could have had groups of African countries, building super awesome technology. But we don't live in that timeline. We live in the timeline where uh, Black people were disrupted consistently in their own country until you know the 1900s, and Black people in America, where they were forced to move, were having their communities burned down and flooded up until the 1970s, even into the 1970s. So I think that's a pretty cool part of that. There's a point, something about Black people being left alone. Um, yeah, I mean there was, along with the Library of Alexandria, we have so many wells of knowledge that were disrupted or destroyed in some way that made it so we have less knowledge than we do now. There's something about that. Oh yeah, so we did have that whole episode planned, and that whole second episode where we kind of went into just general facts that people can learn. And I ultimately decided that it wasn't going to fit. And I decided that it wasn't going to fit for one reason, and that was I knew that this was a topic that was important to me, but I didn't realize how heavy um, it would weigh on my uh, brain when we talked about it. I knew that it was important to me, and I knew that but I didn't think I was going to have such a hard time because I don't usually have a hard time talking about anything. I'm pretty good at talking. Well, no, I'm not going to say it's something I'm good at. I don't really feel sad about things. I don't really feel much about things. So I can usually talk about something I care about without getting too emotional about it, while still getting fired up. I think is like the caveat I want to put on that. Is I still can get fiery about it. I can still show that there's you know thought behind what I think and feel, but I can do it without like getting upset. Um, but the weirdest thing happened when we were recording, and I disassociated for a little bit because I didn't realize how heavily it was going to weigh once everything was kind of laid out in front of me. Right. So we have in that episode we go into an article that shows a list of key points during the civil rights movement, and I decided to have us read that or kind of go through that. And after going through it, I looked and it was just I explained this kind of how I was feeling, and it's just so many times it's a group of people just trying to do something good for themselves and just trying to gain equal footing, and then something horrific happening. Uh, you know, people just trying to fight for having the equal right to live as other people and to be a part of the country and community that they have, and not being given that, and then asking for it in 9 times out of 10 peaceful ways being denied. Um, and then not only being denied, but being uh, decimated for even thinking, speaking out. And that's what we saw with the Black Panthers and Fred Hampton, like I talked about. Fred Hampton was murdered by the FBI after a mole helped leak things to them because they saw him as an influential figure who was going to maybe end um, maybe end racial discrimination. They had documents, they had correspondence where they talked about how they needed to disrupt his leadership, and that sucks, like really bad. And when most of what the Black Panthers were doing weren't even, violent protests, they were just They were doing social programs basically and helping out their communities. Did they have guns? Yeah, they were holding guns because they said we in this country have a constitutional right to carry our firearms and to protect ourselves and our communities. So they carried guns. And then California passed a law that said you can't open carry, and making it illegal to carry your weapon around openly. Um, because what California originally didn't have was the concealed carries. You could carry a weapon, but you had to make sure it was out and it was open. Then California basically made it so you couldn't carry a gun really around at all. Um, and people don't realize that was explicitly targeted at disrupting the Black Panthers. People are like, oh, we need to fight for our gun rights. It's like, well, you guys were perfectly fine not fighting for those gun rights when it, worked to not have social right uprisings happen. You know, when social change wasn't on the line. Oh, now we got to think about our gun rights. When it was a Republican governor of California who passed the bill in the first place. Richard Nixon. It was Richard Nixon, I think. He was governor of California at the time, and he passed the bill that made it so you couldn't really carry a gun at all. And then if you were, you would be arrested, so that he could justify arresting the Black Panther Party members. That was in California. Uh, that wasn't even in Chicago where Fred Hampton was murdered. Uh, you have these social movements happen, and people do anything and everything they can to stop them, and then people wonder why we still care about these issues and why we still bring them up. It's like, oh, why bring up racism? Why even teach people about racism? Then they won't even know about it. It's like, well, it's still happening. And it was really bad while it was happening the first time, so we can't just forget about it because that's really weird to say, right? When we have an event that is colloquially known as Bloody Sunday, as a historical event, not during a war, that is kind of weird, right? Like, isn't it a little weird that that's an event and not even like a part of any particular military conflict? It's just a thing that happened, and it's weird. Um, so anytime anyone ever says that, oh, let's just not talk about it, it's like, well, we're going to. I'm going to force you. I'm gonna force you to learn, which is kind of what I did to my teacher. Uh, but at the same time, yeah, I'm gonna make you learn about something you didn't previously know about because um, it sucks that I had to grow up with this knowledge inherently. You're gonna learn secondhand. Um, yeah, that's kind of what that was kind of about. I left out some stuff about, specifically uh, certain parts of history, uh, not on purpose in any meaningful sense. It was mostly um, partially a time thing, partially gosh, this is such a heavy topic. I just gotta chill a little bit. You know, um, yeah, it's just incredibly difficult to talk about because it's like so important and so just so much. And that could be an argument for why we don't teach it. But I think it needs to be taught. Because if we keep not teaching it and we keep not telling people and keep not giving people the chance to um, say, hey, maybe this isn't this isn't a society I want to be a part of, you need to give people the chance to do that. Otherwise, they won't even know that something's wrong. We need to have a well-informed public so that they can make decisions that benefit everybody. You know, if they're a hardcore KKK member and Nazi, then that sucks. But hopefully, that'll make more people who aren't that way, right? Um, it's like the same thing as well. If you're an out and about Nazi, let's say your child goes to school and learns about some pretty terrible things that happen to human beings, and we make sure we iterate the fact that it was human beings, then you might have a kid that questions you, and that'll suck for you as a parent. But ultimately, it's a society. We have one more person questioning the structures, and we have one less person willing to hate other people for existing. And I think that's incredibly important to me to help people learn things. In the Kanye talk, we kind of, in our group and kind of around people, we kind of refer to that as the Kanye episode, because I knew that I was going to talk about him as a figure. Um, and that's partially why Dalia's on, just because I know she knows a lot and was able to give her perspective as somebody who doesn't just know him as like in an academic sense, because I know Kanye in an academic sense. I'm not like a Kanye fan or anything. I just kind of know of him in terms of this topic and just kind of the Black community in general. But Dalia does have like a very specific insight of him as like a human being, and I think that was a little bit important to showcase that, like, because I can say all I want that it's the oppressive structures and it's mental illness and stuff like that, but she can really say um, it was conflicting for me knowing the damage that he was able to cause to my community while also knowing how important he was to the community he's doing harm to, which is a really interesting dynamic that Kanye lives in. He did a lot of damage to his, to people in his community, while feeling like he is helping. Um, I think we all feel like that. We've all been in a situation like that where we've done that, where we've, um, been doing something that we felt like was a good thing, and we were helping and we were doing the right thing. Um, but then it turns out that we're actually doing bad, and we really don't want to believe it because that your intention was never to do anything wrong, but you end up doing something wrong anyway, and that sucks. And people don't like to think about that because it does hurt, because then you have to reflect on the fact that, oh God, I hurt people I care about because I couldn't handle being wrong. And that thought, even if you don't think it's correct, the thought of that is really sucky. So you do what you can to discredit anybody who's saying something like that to make sure that you're correct. And I think that's mostly where Kanye comes in. And I feel like a lot of people come in. I think there's a lot of people on in politics right now who don't want to admit that they're doing something harmful because that might mean something about them that they don't want to confront just yet. And that's unfortunate because everyone has to confront things they don't like eventually. And the longer it takes for people to own up to possible wrongdoing, the longer it will, the worse they're gonna feel. Um, so I think that's also a good reason um, I did what I did. So then we have more people who can recognize where they have previous biases that might color how they treat people and how they think about people and how they think about the things they do and say. Um, but if we just have a little bit more learning going on, then um, I think we can kind of start weeding some of those things out because people are going to want to make effort. Um, yeah, like an example, I guess, would be like somebody who I'm trying to think. Did I even want to give an example? I was trying to say something, but oh, here's what I was thinking. If I will never be mad at somebody for attempting to reflect. I will never be mad at somebody for a slip of the tongue, for you know, a negative opinion that they may hold. If I know that they have made a good, honest attempt uh, to consistently try and reflect on the things they think and feel. Because if they are trying to reflect on themselves, if they are doing what they feel they can to change how they think about certain things, I will never be mad because I know that that's incredibly difficult. So let's say I talk to somebody and they say, hey, or I talk to somebody and say, hey, what you are saying and the way that you use certain phrases or words is actually incredibly harmful. And I'd recommend you reflect on kind of why you say the things you say and where you got them from and their history. Because I think that would kind of give you a little bit better idea of what you truly are saying. And then their response could be one of two things. Oh my god, or not even oh my god. Okay, yeah, I don't know where to start. That's part of it. I think some people just don't know where to start. And I, I'd be like, hey, you might want to assess why you're saying the things you say, think the things you think, and feel the way you do. Because I think there might be biases you hold that you don't even realize you're holding. And then kind of be like, hey, here's this video. I'd recommend kind of watching it and kind of getting a different perspective, even if it doesn't kind of change anything, or even if you don't understand half of what's being said. Yeah, I think it's a good starting point, and just kind of go off of that. That's what I would say to somebody, because I think that would be helpful. And they showed interest, and they said, I don't know where to start, but I would like to try. Thank you for bringing it to my attention that I might be doing something that is harming other people. Wonderful, great, we love it. The other thing that they could say is, oh, you're just being sensitive. I'm not saying anything that's wrong. You're fine. That's, I don't like that. That's not good. Um, because ultimately they don't want to assess and change and reflect on what they think and how they feel and how that might affect others, which is ultimately what language is. It's affecting others. Some people say that you shouldn't be affected by things other people say. Well, that's the point. The point of speaking to somebody is to have an effect. We can't be debating about issues. Can't be debating about the gays or something like that. And then at the same time, hey, don't let somebody says change how you feel. It's like, well, that's truly the only point in talking. The only point in talking is to change how other people think and perceive you and the things around them. And that's why we have dialogue and that's why we talk at all. So both of those people, a month down the line, could say something the exact same way, um, the exact same wrong thing. Like, I'm trying to think of an example that I can use. Like, yeah, let's say, let's use gay as an example. Um, let's say somebody, uh, you talk to two people, they were calling things gay in a derogatory manner. Talk to these two theoretical people, and one of them says, oh my gosh, or I didn't know that was harmful. Is there anything I could uh, kind of do to learn more about why it's harmful? And then you give them the things and they go read or listen and learn. Um, that great. And then you have the second person goes, you're being sensitive, facts don't care about your feelings. You're I'm not saying gay is bad, I'm saying something bad is gay. Um, it's fine. It's just a word. Don't don't let words shouldn't dictate how you feel. Okay, dog. That's what words are for, but awesome. Okay, you have those two people. Now, a month down the line, you're sitting down watching TV with each of these friends, and um, the you're watching football, and the game goes out. Oh no, TV stopped working, the game goes out, and they both simultaneously go. This is like two parallel universes, could be the same guy. Anyway, um, TV goes out. Ah, that's gay. And then one of them stops and says, "No, nope," or they catch themselves, or they're like, they say it and they curse themselves a little bit, and they're like, ah, "I shouldn't have. That was wrong." I will never be mad at that person. I will never be mad at that person. I might not even address it because they addressed it to themselves. They were like, "Crap, I did the wrong thing again, and I don't want to be wrong, especially if I know that's hurting somebody. I need to next time something happens, I need to make sure I think about this. You know, they reflect. They reflect on what they did, and they fix it. The other person says it and doesn't bat an eye. Maybe is like, oh, well, it maybe reflects on the fact that you are going to get mad. I'm gonna be mad at that person every time. Every single time I'm gonna be mad. Every single time I'm gonna call them out. It doesn't. It doesn't matter what people say. It matters um, their intent and willingness, because sometimes intent is not so cut and dry. Maybe you can't tell somebody's intent, but if you call them out and they're like, "I'm really sorry. I'm trying to reflect on my language and how I say things and kind of the things that I put together in my brain." And it's like, okay, well now you know you talked to that person. You kind of know how they're feeling about how they talk, and that's that. The other guy, you lecture him. That's what you do. You lecture him, and then you say, "Dog, stop," and then he's gonna probably get pissed a little bit, and you're gonna be like, "I don't care. That's not good." Ultimately, those two things will have two different outcomes, but I will never be mad at the first guy because he's trying. I will always be mad at the second guy because he's not. And I think that's an important thing to touch on for this podcast specifically. I kind of rambled a little bit, but I do feel like that's important in regards to what the art that I made, the piece that I have created. I think it's incredibly important for um, us to be charitable to people who are making attempts to try and change, because there are a lot of people who aren't, and if we keep not giving people the ability to learn, they won't take it, right? And I think that's again comes back to why I made this, comes back to why I'm doing any of this. Uh, I want to give people the capacity to learn. And yeah, right? Like, if I don't give you the chance to learn, then I can never be mad at you because I didn't give you the chance to deny me. If I didn't give you the chance to deny my help or deny the ability to reflect, then I can't be mad because I don't know if you even know that you're doing something wrong. Now, once you've been given that, then what comes next is up to you. Because I sure damn well know that some people won't change, some people won't reflect, and that's fine. because some people just focusing on getting through the day, honestly. And I know that that's a hard thing to do, and that sometimes doing these extra things is an extra thing. It's an extra step. Uh, but I think it would serve everybody better if people just reflected a little bit on the structures they live under, the opinions and biases they may have, and how that affects other people. That's all this is. That's all this will ever be. That's all it's ever been. Just giving people the chance to make an attempt. Because if I don't, then I can't know. Um, yeah, that's that. Um, thank you for listening to the Black Ice podcast. Should I explain the name? I could explain the name. The name comes from the iceberg model, where you start at the top of a topic and you talk about the surface levels of it. You talk about the beginnings of it, very surface level, like very like, I mean, not really surface level maybe, but you kind of start with the beginnings of it, uh, and then the simple stuff, the stuff people usually generally know, and then you kind of go deeper and deeper, and you go into the lore and the backstory, the theories that have arisen in more recent eras, and you just go deeper and deeper and more niche and niche into a topic. Um, usually people do it in videos, sometimes people do it in podcasts. I did it in a podcast, obviously, where every episode kind of led to a more niche uh, aspect of it all. Uh, but yeah, so it comes from the iceberg model of topical explanation, I guess we'll say, as well as the, um, uh, well, that's where the iceberg comes from. Black, obviously, that's what the topic is. That's what I am. That's what half of my co-hosts are. Um, that's like the topic, and that's what my whole thing was, right? And then at the same time, it's like black ice. Like when you're driving, like that sheet of ice after it's really cold and it rains, and there's clear ice on the road, and because the street is black, you can't see it, um, and it's slippery. It's a slippery slope, and it's extremely dangerous because you don't see something that's right in front of you. And yeah, that has some maybe anarcho uh, reflective kind of sentiments behind it. But yeah, that's where the name comes from. That's why we called it that, because it's stuff that's right in front of you, but you're just not seeing. Uh, yeah. Again, thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Ice podcast. It may return, it may not. We will see. Um, I do hope you enjoyed. Um, and again, I recommend watching the videos in the playlist. I will link the playlist below. Um, it's all extremely interesting. If you found any of what we've said interesting, yeah, that's kind of it. Go watch those things. Uh, keep learning. There's always more to learn. It's incredibly important to learn. Um, and I think everyone should do it more. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I will maybe see you next time.